You notice it in the quiet hours. The lights are off. The room is still. The day has technically ended, but your mind has not. An argument from earlier resurfaces. Sometimes it was this afternoon. Sometimes it was 3 weeks ago. Sometimes it was years ago. The words come back with uncomfortable clarity. Their tone, your tone, the pause between sentences, the look on their face. You lie there staring at the ceiling and suddenly you are not in bed anymore. You are back in that moment. You hear yourself saying what you said. Then you hear what you should have said. Then you rewrite it. Then you replay it. Over and over. And the question creeps in quietly. Why now? Why at night? Why when I am supposed to rest? Does my brain choose to reopen something that already happened? Maybe it was something small, a casual disagreement with a colleague. During the day you brushed it off, but at night you dissect every phrase. You think, I should have said that differently. I should have defended myself more clearly. I sounded weak. I sounded rude. I should have explained. The scene loops, and each replay feels like you are tightening a screw inside your chest. Or maybe it was with a friend. A slight misunderstanding, a subtle shift in their expression. You replay the micro moment. Did they pull back? Did I offend them? Did something change between us? Your body tenses, even though you are alone in the dark. The argument grows bigger in memory than it ever was in reality. In relationships, it often goes deeper. A partner's sharp comment from earlier in the evening echoes louder at night. You replay your response. You edit it. You imagine staying calmer. You imagine saying the perfect sentence that would have prevented the tension. Your chest feels tight. Your jaw clenches. Sleep moves further away. The argument is no longer about the words. It becomes about what it means. Does this mean we are drifting? Does this mean I am not enough? Does this mean something is wrong? Socially, it might be more subtle. A group conversation where you felt slightly overlooked. No one attacked you. No one insulted you. But you felt small. You replay the silence after you spoke. You replay their side glances. You replay what you did not say. The argument is now internal. You versus yourself. Why did I say that? Why did I stay quiet? Why am I like this? At work, it shows up as performance replay, a feedback session that felt slightly tense, a boss who paused too long before answering. You go to bed, but your mind opens the meeting again. You analyze their tone, their wording, your posture. Did I seem defensive? Did I seem insecure? Will this affect tomorrow? And now, tomorrow has not even arrived, but you're already bracing for it. Over time, these nighttime replays do something subtle. They erode your rest. You wake up tired, even if you technically slept. You carry yesterday's unresolved tension into today's conversations. Your identity starts bending around it. You quietly label yourself as the overthinker, the sensitive one, the one who cannot let things go. And here is the question that sits underneath everything. Who would I be if my mind stopped replaying? Who am I without the rehearsal? Your relationships feel heavier. Your spouse notices you staring into space at dinner. They think you are distracted. They do not know you are replaying last week's argument again. A friend sends a simple message, and you hesitate, not because of the message, but because your mind is still holding onto an old emotional echo. Even brushing your teeth can trigger it. Commuting can trigger it. The dark silence before sleep is simply the loudest stage. So why does the brain cling to arguments? Why does it reopen scenes when there is no immediate threat? The answer is uncomfortable and relieving at the same time. It is not weakness. It is not lack of discipline. It is not a broken personality. It is protection. Your mind is not torturing you. It is rehearsing. Arguments represent social risk. Conflict threatens connection. Connection is survival to your nervous system. When something feels unresolved, your brain flags it as unfinished. The emotional residue remains active. During the day, you are distracted, stimulated, busy. Your prefrontal cortex is engaged in tasks. But at night, external input fades. Silence amplifies internal signals. That leftover emotional charge rises to the surface. Your amygdala does not understand that the argument is over. It understands emotional tension as potential danger. It signals alert. Something was off. Something felt unsafe. Review it. Learn from it. Prevent it. And once that signal is activated, your default mode network takes over. This is the network responsible for self-reflection and mental simulation. It replays the scene, not to hurt you, but to refine you. It imagines alternate outcomes. It searches for better scripts. It asks how to avoid the same vulnerability again. The problem is not that your brain rehearses. The problem is that it does not know when to stop. Each replay gives you a tiny illusion of control. You feel like you are solving something, extracting a lesson, but often you are just strengthening the loop. Because every time you replay without resolution, you reinforce the habit. The brain learns that nighttime equals rehearsal time. Conflict equals threat. Threat equals repetition. Think of it like a stage performance. The argument becomes a scene. You are both actor and director. You replay the dialogue, trying to perfect your role. But instead of closing the curtain, you keep the spotlight on yourself. The performance continues long after the audience has left. A simple model captures this. Conflict equals perceived threat. Perceived threat equals rehearsal. Rehearsal equals temporary relief. Temporary relief reinforces rehearsal, and the cycle repeats. Now, here is where the shift begins. The goal is not to eliminate rehearsal completely. The goal is to regulate it, to teach your brain that you can learn without looping endlessly. Start before bed. Do not wait for the replay to ambush you. Create a small evening closure ritual. Take 2 minutes and acknowledge one emotionally charged moment from the day. Not analyze it, not solve it, just acknowledge it. That meeting felt tense. That comment hurt. That conversation felt incomplete. When you consciously label it earlier, you recruit your prefrontal cortex. You signal to your brain that it has been noticed. This reduces the intensity of amygdala alerts later. Next, when the replay starts in the dark, label it gently, not with frustration, not with shame. Simply say internally, this is rehearsal. This is protection. Naming the process reduces the grip of the default mode network. It creates distance between you and the scene. You are not inside the argument. You are observing the rehearsal of it. That small shift weakens emotional intensity. Then introduce a micro reframe, not a fantasy version where you win the argument perfectly, but a balanced statement. Maybe we both felt tense. Maybe they were stressed too. Maybe this does not define the entire relationship. This reframing updates amygdala predictions. It teaches your nervous system that conflict does not equal catastrophe. Over time, this reduces the urgency of rehearsal. After that, redirect your attention to a neutral anchor, something present and sensory, the weight of the blanket, the sound of the fan, the rhythm of your breathing. This shifts dopamine away from problem solving and back towards safety cues. You are training your brain that rest is safe, even if the argument was imperfect. Finally, track progress, not perfection. Notice nights when the replay faded faster, when labeling shortened the loop, when reframing softened the edge. Each small success strengthens new neural pathways. Your brain begins learning that rehearsal can be brief instead of endless. Picture the full cycle differently now. Trigger appears. Amygdala signals threat. Default mode network initiates rehearsal, but instead of automatic looping, you insert awareness. Label, reframe, anchor, reinforce. The cycle bends. Conflict becomes information instead of invasion. And here is something deeper to consider. The reason these replays hurt so much is because connection matters to you. If you did not care about belonging, respect, harmony, identity, you would not replay. The loop is not proof that you are broken. It is proof that relationships matter to your nervous system. The task is not to silence that instinct, but to guide it. Imagine lying in bed tonight and the replay begins. Instead of fighting it, you recognize it. Instead of drowning in it, you observe it. Instead of perfecting it, you soften it, and slowly the intensity reduces. The argument loses its sharp edges. The scene fades without being forced. There is a quiet moment that comes after that, a small gap where your body feels lighter, where the ceiling no longer feels like a screen projecting old conversations. That space is not emptiness. It is regulation. It is your nervous system learning safety again. So, if you have ever stared at the ceiling at 2 a.m, replaying a sentence from weeks ago, you're not alone. Your brain is not your enemy. It is rehearsing because it wants you prepared. The skill is teaching it when rehearsal is complete. Tonight, when the mind tries to reopen the stage, ask yourself gently, is this rehearsal still useful? Or can I let the curtain fall? And if even one replay fades a little faster after this, you will know something important. The loop was never a prison. It was a pattern, and patterns can be rewired. If this felt like it was describing your nights exactly, comment with the one sentence your mind keeps replaying. Naming it is the first interruption, and sometimes that interruption is the beginning of real rest.